This is the future of the West that we are talking about here. We've already invested collectively tens of billions of dollars in arming Ukraine, in providing humanitarian aid to Ukraine, in looking after Ukraine's 7 million refugees now in Western Europe. And are we really going to sacrifice all of that because Donald Trump doesn't want to give any kind of success to Joe Biden?
Well, the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, has appealed to Republicans in the US Congress to approve a critical package of funding for Ukraine, warning them not to show the weakness displayed against Hitler in the 1930s. In an article, Cameron admitted he was dropping all diplomatic niceties, but he said that Britain and America's joint history shows the folly of giving in to tyrants in Europe who believe in redrawing boundaries by force. Well, the US Senate has approved a package of military support for Ukraine, Israel and other allies worth a total of $95 billion after months of delay. But the bill now goes to the House of Representatives, and Donald Trump, the former president, is urging Republicans there to block the deal. Well, tonight, the right-wing Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene told Sky News what she made of the Foreign Secretary's language.
I think he tried to compare us to Hitler also. And if that's the kind of language he wants to use, I really have nothing to say to him.
Well, he likened you to an appeaser to Hitler in not voting through funding for Ukraine. Are you an appeaser for Putin?
I think that I really don't care what David Cameron has to say. I think that's rude name-calling, and I don't appreciate that type of language. And David Cameron needs to worry about his own country, and frankly, he can kiss my ass.
But do you think Putin's the good guy in all this?
Well, Alexander Kara is a former advisor to Ukraine's Minister of Defense. He welcomed Lord Cameron's remarks.
Well, I think it's the right language and at the right time, and I understand that we can face Mr. Trump after November elections, and certainly it will be absolutely different story. But now our guys in the front line are short of shells, and certainly with this assistance, there will be less casualties of our soldiers and certainly less casualties of our civilians. The Russians are shelling our neighboring cities.
Well, Lord Darroch is a former British ambassador to the United States. He was also National Security Advisor to David Cameron when he was Prime Minister and joins us now. Good evening, Lord Darroch.
Good evening, Carol.
What do you make of this appeal from David Cameron and the language that he's used?
Look, I promise you I am far from a universal supporter of government policies, particularly in the domestic sphere. But on this, I think that David Cameron was absolutely spot on, exactly right. And I think it's quite brave of him to use the language that he has used. But I think we're in a very perilous situation now. And if Putin is allowed to win in Ukraine, and if US military aid to Ukraine is stopped, I fear that can happen. But I think it's a catastrophic defeat for the West. So there's a huge amount at stake here. So good on David Cameron to have put things in the stark terms that he has. And the historical analogy that he's used, I think there is some depth to it.
This language, though, it's far from diplomatic. Do you think there's a danger, as we heard from Marjorie Taylor Greene there, that it might, frankly, annoy some of those Republicans who are holding up this money?
Well, I'm not sure there is much that you can do to persuade those Republicans. I think they're very entrenched in their position. I think criticism from Marjorie Taylor Greene is a badge of honor, to be honest. And I think that kind of language might just make the mainstream Republicans, who are still in the majority, certainly in the Senate, but also in the House of Representatives, think about giving the amount of space and power they're giving to the Republicans on the hard right. And I mean, you need language like this, Carol, to bring home the gravity of the situation, because I promise you, if arms supplies to Ukraine don't continue through this year, at the very best, they can't launch any more offensives, and they're in a position where basically Russia entrenches itself in the land that they already hold in Ukraine, which is 15% of the of the territory of Ukraine. But at worst, Russia has the capability, it has limitless resources compared to Ukraine, to actually launch an offensive and to grab more Ukrainian territory, even at worst to be able to take Kyiv and to install some sort of puppet government there. So we face the potential of a really serious, arguably catastrophic defeat in Ukraine unless we can get both American and European aid through to Ukrainian forces.
And Ukraine itself has been making the point of how desperately it needs this military package of support. And we're going to be hearing more from Ukraine in an hour's time on the programme. But Lord Cameron, I mean, he has experience as Prime Minister. He's also directly challenging Donald Trump, isn't he? Because the former president, the man who may well be returning to the White House within a matter of months, is making it clear that he doesn't want Republicans to back that deal and give Joe Biden the political triumph of getting the deal through.
I honestly don't think we should see the future of Ukraine in the context of American domestic politics. And I think it's, not sure Donald Trump would care what I think about this, but I think it's profoundly irresponsible to basically, as Trump is doing, to try to persuade Republicans in the House to block aid to Ukraine, essentially for domestic political reasons to, as he would say it, to ensure the Democrats don't get a victory, to basically deliver a defeat for them. This is the future of the West that we are talking about here. We've already invested collectively tens of billions of dollars in arming Ukraine, in providing humanitarian aid to Ukraine, in looking after Ukraine's 7 million refugees now in Western Europe. And are we really going to sacrifice all of that because Donald Trump doesn't want to give any kind of success to Joe Biden? I mean, really, is that where we've got to? I hope not.
Well, clearly, the Foreign Secretary and indeed the Prime Minister really want this package of aid to go through. And Rishi Sunak, as well as Lord Cameron, have made it clear that Britain's commitment to Ukraine will endure. But do you think that Lord Cameron, who's in what for many people is an unenviable position, he's the Foreign Secretary, he doesn't have to worry about his seat anymore because he's in the Lords, do you think he's freelancing a bit in his role as Foreign Secretary?
I think he is using his authority and his experience to go just a little bit further than someone with less experience and with less sort of background behind him might do. I mean, not just in this area, but also on Gaza, Carol. I note that he has toughened up the British line on Gaza, and I think that in parallel, the Americans have also toughened their rhetoric about what this ground offensive in Gaza might involve. And I think that is, I mean, you might call it freelancing, you might call him using the authority of the office and his personal experience over his time as Prime Minister to just push the British position into a slightly more assertive place than it was. And personally, it's a personal view, I think he's been right to do it, and I think it's the right place for us to be positioning ourselves.
Lord Darroch, our former British ambassador to the US, former national security advisor. Really good to speak to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.